Hello, and welcome to this week's Art Like Minisode. So this is just a series to kind of hold you over until next week when the next full episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast comes out. So this mini conversation for today, I want to talk about. I heard it on a recent podcast I saw, and I even seen it in this little clip. But something I really want to emphasize and more or less talk about is how it is very important that we remember that people are whole individuals even outside of ourselves. So, like, very often we like to think that, or at least we kind of get so in our head that we forget that other people also have their own internal landscapes. And that does a disservice not just to them as a person, but also to your ability to actually have a relationship with them, because we see oftentimes when you don't sort of more or less consider that this other person might have an entire internal landscape that exists beyond your comprehension, often assume the worst, or we force ourselves to believe that maybe they believe the worst in us without considering that they could have a whole lot of other things going on for them. A very good example of this, and the art I want to use to kind of like emphasize this point, is if you've been watching those little Chinese drama shorts. I've recently gotten somewhat obsessed with them, but in every single one that I watch, you see an example of someone not believing that, like, the main lead is capable of thinking outside of the parameters of what they believe that person is. So, like, you see these side characters who are assuming, like, the main female lead will only ever be obsessed with them, and that it is impossible for them to come to, like, the female lead to realize that, like, hey, this person has been treating me like garbage. I don't deserve this. I'm going to move on. Like, they can't conceptualize that, like, the female lead exists and has a life outside of them. And the same for a lot of the male leads. You'll see the male lead existing and, like, almost being like this really devoted partner or devoted person, and the person bullying them and the people who are taking advantage of said kindness and devotion, believing that, like, oh, that person wouldn't exist without me. They worship the ground that I walk on. There's no way that they would come to realize, or that they recognize that I'm treating them like garbage. And so it's things like that. Remember that the people outside of you are people too. So I would recommend going in assuming people are somewhat capable instead of assuming the latter. So assume this person is a person and they too have worlds within themselves that I know nothing of, essentially. But yeah, that's all I got for today's mini episode. Be sure to check out last week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. We talk about what yearning just in general, really. And I think it's a really fun episode. And I look forward to seeing you all next week as well, where we're going to be talking about something totally different. So, yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.